Before we jump into this topic of how to talk business with your spouse, which is like kind of a doozy of a topic, Adrienne, I would love for you to just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your business, Hearts Content Events, so that they can just become a little bit more familiar with you and what you do and why I called you a marriage enthusiast on all my like marketing, which I feel like is so true. So I'd love for you to like touch on that a little bit.
Oh, yay, yay. Hi, everybody. Kat, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so thrilled. And, this is a huge part of where my heart is. So I'm like, this is probably one of the things that I can talk for days and hours and hours and hours on, just relationships and cultivating them and things like that. So I'm just so pumped, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. So Hearts Content Events. It's always so funny when people ask you about your business or to talk about yourself. It's like, where do I start, right? So Hearts Content Events and Design is a wedding planning, design, and floral artistry business. We also, on the other side of the business, my husband and I are marriage encouragers for creative entrepreneurs. And so what that means is that we do and say the things necessary in order to uplift the marriages of creative entrepreneurs while they are balancing the growth of their thriving businesses. I feel like that's something that's just so important in our industry, that we acknowledge the foundation of our lives and acknowledge that our marriages are what lifts our businesses up and help. What we do is we help married entrepreneurs learn how to just really navigate the balance between married life and business life. So it's a little bit of my business there. I'm located here in Hampton Roads, Virginia, where we receive no snow whatsoever. I was so mad about that.
And I'm over here like, take it. Like, would you like some snow? We have so much. Like, have it all.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm a mom to two really amazing kids. James is he just turned 3 years old. It's crazy. And then Nora is going to be 1 in April. And then of course I can't forget, if I'm talking about talking to your spouses, and I can't forget to just talk about my spouse as well. Josh and I have been married for 5 years now. As of March 16th, we just celebrated an anniversary. And he is my anchor. He's everything to me. So I'm so excited about just chatting with you guys about how we encourage marriages and what we do to help creative entrepreneurs be better stewards of their relationship while they balance the growth of a thriving business. So yay.
I love it. I love it so much. Yeah, one of the things when I was brainstorming even like topics I wanted to have here on Coffee Chats was, I feel like it was marriage and business. I feel like it's something that we maybe talk about kind of quietly behind the scenes. Maybe when you're out to coffee, like real life coffee with a friend, or, you connect with someone at a conference. So during like that late night conversation, maybe there's a glass of wine and some tears and chocolate or whatever. And it just comes out that, hey, oh, you struggle with this too. It's not something that we always talk about as openly. And I think it's for several reasons. I mean, our marriages are, of course, very private, very personal. Every marriage is different. And so there's definitely no right or wrong. So I do want to have that little disclaimer out for all of you guys tuning into. Like, Adrienne and I, of course, have like our own experience and things that have worked and haven't worked with, dealing with our business within the realm of marriage, especially when we're not technically like a husband and wife team in terms of the business, right? Matt recently, within the last year, jumped on board for the business. And so it's been a really interesting transition, to kind of navigate all of that. But I remember those first like 3.5 years of running a business where he was teaching full time. So he was not in the creative sphere. had no idea, literally no idea what I was talking about. Didn't understand the ins and the outs of the industry, everything from like, what is a styled shoot to, okay, wait, you can like, we need to charge this, like to, price points and what was like the average price point to charge for various services or to pay for, coaching or pay for different services. So we've definitely had a lot of those conversations, but I just want to have that disclaimer that anything that Adrienne and I talk about today, like, is of course what's worked for us. And we hope that it's encouraging and helpful and enlightening to you guys, but we don't want to say that this is the end all be all, because every marriage is different and it is like two very different personalities typically, right? Joining together, living life together. And there's just a lot of things kind of just evolving around that sphere. So I just wanted to like state that before we got too far into this. And I wanted to make sure that I'd said that. If you guys are hanging out in the chat, have you ever, I don't want to say like felt frustrated, but I don't really know of another word, frustrated or just like maybe overwhelmed with how to talk about business with your spouse. If you like, give me like an emoji or just say like, yes, you can like tell us the situation, whatever it might be. But I'd love to know just kind of like how you guys have felt in terms of talking about various business things with your spouse. Brooke, yes. Okay. Yeah, we know. Emily, yes. Okay. We know we're not alone in it. So all of the above, all the things. Okay. Good. We're all in the right space then.
Yeah.
So Adrienne, when you first started your business, did you have a season where it was really difficult to explain the industry to Josh? Like, I know you mentioned that you guys are now obviously like encouraging other entrepreneurs that are married, just like now Matt and I have transitioned to working together. So while it might not necessarily be something that we are facing as in this exact moment, because we do work with them in our business sphere a little bit more than what we did when we first started. But I love to think back, to when we first started. And if you could talk a little bit about maybe some of those conversations went down, or how you felt, or how you navigated through that when you were first stepping into small business life and he wasn't.
Yeah. So, yeah, definitely. I understand the struggle 100%. I always joke around with people that Josh and I could not be more different from one another. Josh is a computer engineer, software engineer. So that means he is very left brain, very mathematical, very logical in his thinking. He thinks of things in terms of steps. He thinks of things very logically. He sees a lot of things at face value. If you explain something to him, it has to be very concrete to the nth degree. If I tell him I want to go to I want something from the grocery store, I can't just tell him I want grape juice, because he might get the store brand instead of the Welch's grape juice that I actually want. And so, that's how he is. But I'm more like the artsy fartsy mentality. Part of my business is that I do some event design and floral artistry. And so, but that to me is like, other than the logistical side, I love logistics, but I love the design because that just allows me to let my freak flag fly, which is really a gift that I was given. And so like, we honestly couldn't be more different. And starting out the business and trying to explain things like, okay, so the bride wants this flower and this flower together, but I'm not exactly sure if they look right together. And even small things like within the logistics that are creative, like creating the timeline and saying that the bride wants to do a special dance with someone who's not her father, someone who's really special to them. And Josh would be like, well, why do they want to do that, rather than just going with the flow and just listening and really hearing what I was asking him to do. So like, yeah, we definitely went through seasons like that, and we still do, the fact is, the biggest acknowledgement is that we are completely different people, and we think of things differently, and we process information a lot differently. And I think once you start to acknowledge that, once you start to embrace who you are as individuals and the fact that your differences make you shine brighter together, that's what really helps to lay that foundation of trust and passion even in your relationship. And so, yeah, absolutely. Like we've dealt with so many, so many seasons of those disagreements and things like that. But those disagreements don't make us any less strong as a couple. Oh, Megan, your husband is a software engineer too. Awesome. That doesn't make us any less strong as a couple. That helps to foster a sense of trust and understanding in one another, and builds our ability to communicate well with one another. I always say that like there are these pillars, so to speak, in every relationship. So you can't, so you have passion and you have trust and you have forgiveness and you have all these things that really lay the foundation of a meaningful and lasting marriage, really. And you can't have one without the other. You can't seek forgiveness to your spouse if you don't have some sort of trust in the middle there. You can't have passion in your marriage if you don't have some trust in order to be vulnerable and allow yourself to be who you are in front of the other person, and so on and so forth. So yeah, the really important thing is that Josh and I have really learned how to communicate well with one another and trust each other enough that even though we have a disagreement, this isn't the end all be all. We're not going to break up or have some type of really difficult moment. You know what, my dad has this amazing quote that he always says to young couples. My dad's a pastor, and he obviously gives a lot of counseling to young couples before they get married. Is especially in conflict management, is so important to realize that even when you are, I'm trying to remember the exact quote, even when you are in the biggest disagreements, that doesn't necessarily mean that everything is going to fall apart. That the opposite, that's the quote, the opposite of hate, the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference, actually. And so it's the moment where you are in those disagreements and you stop caring. That's really when a lot of the nonchalance and the deeper seated issues start to rise to the surface, and things kind of start going downhill from there. So really the important thing is that you communicate and you constantly engage. And I can't even stress that enough, for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's helpful for all of us. We have to figure out the best ways to communicate. And that's going to vary depending on your spouse's personality and your personality.
Yeah.
So for some ways, the ways that Matt and I communicate isn't going to work in another marriage because nobody else's marriage looks exactly like ours.
Exactly. Yeah.
Freedom in that, rather than I know, especially just for marriage in general. When we first got married, I wanted like the cookie cutter, like this is how I'm supposed to do it. And I realized that that's not the case, right? Like I can't create somebody else's marriage in my own marriage. So that was like a really interesting mindset that I had to shift around, and just to realize that I needed to learn how to communicate in the best ways for him, just like he needed to learn how to communicate in the best ways for me.
Absolutely.
A couple of the things that I struggled with, and have still, even though Matt and I work together now in the business, y'all, I think there's just communication in marriage in general is just something, it kind of goes through seasons, right? You're just going to have where you communicate really well on a couple of things, and then maybe you have a season where you don't communicate as well. But I struggled with the financial aspect of my business. And I don't know if anybody else struggled with that too, or is currently struggling with like how to like talk about that with your spouse. Matt and I, first of all, are very opposite when it comes to our finances. He is the saver and I am the spender, just naturally. So that in general just makes for really funny, not so funny marriage conversation.
Yeah.
I'm so blessed to have married a saver because I am a spender. And so he just shows me a very different side of things, right? And I feel like over the last 5 years that we have been married has trained me so I'm not as much of a spender anymore. And I like think more about saving than I would have before I married him. He handles all of our personal finances, which I'm super grateful for because I don't like numbers anyway. And he is more frugal than us. So for him to be responsible, you know, and understand our family budget and understand where finances are going is so helpful for us because his mind is saving it, right? And his mind is how can we continue to be profitable as a family and not, you know, be stressed about finances if, you know, an emergency situation comes up and things like that. Well, when I started my business, I was handling all of my business finances. And I found that, and again, you guys can chime in the chat if you were like, yes, girl, me too. But I found for me, I'm just laying it all out there for y'all. It became like a pride thing for me to talk about my business finances with him. Because either it's my business, like I'm bringing this in and I have this structure and I know like what money needs to go where for expenses and where I want to invest and who, like what, you know, conference I want to attend next, or I want to, you know, hire the brand designer, and now I want to do this, or, you know, whatever. I was constantly, so it was a pride thing for me to like bring him into it. It was also just hard to have some of those conversations because, I mean, you guys know our industry is its own little bubble. The creative industry, you know, the fact that like hiring a brand designer is important, right? Like having that custom website is important. Going to those conferences where like for him with teaching, he could go to a conference and it was like $200. Conferences in the creative industry are 10 times that amount. Like they're just not, you know, they are not what that amount is. And so it was very, frustrating for me to have those conversations with him because he didn't understand the industry in the first place. And he didn't see, like, he wasn't on Instagram like I was, right? He didn't see what all those other people were doing like I was seeing. So that was really humbling conversations that we had to have. I was really convicted actually when I went to my second year of business. I went to Pursuit Conference. And at the time, it was Pursuit 31. And I was really convicted by a friend of mine that I needed to bring Matt into the business more. And we needed to have designated time to talk about the business together. Whether that was like, hey guys, make it a business expense. Like seriously, plan like one night a month even that you're like, we're going out to dinner and we're going to talk about like the more of the nitty gritty in the business. Not just like, not that it's not important to talk about like what happened today and you tell them about that bride that emailed you or that fun new client project that you picked up. Like those should just happen on the regular, right? Because it's not a matter of day. But I think it's really important. And that was really great advice for me. So I wanted to share that with you guys that if you aren't already, have a designated time at least once a month where you're, again, make it a business expense. Go out to your favorite restaurant. It could be Chipotle. It could be Chick-fil-A. It could be a nice place. Like, who cares? Go out and have conversations about your business. Talk about like, okay, this is where we're looking at like profit-wise. This is what I'm thinking about investing in. This is where I'm really struggling in the business. What do you think? And just put on that grace hat before you go and know that it might take a little bit longer to explain something, or he might ask some really great questions that you hadn't thought of before, but having that like open-ended, like safe space to talk about is super, super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like the thing that you struck on that bringing your spouse into the business, having those designated times, just so important. I love that. It's just what I feel is that oftentimes spouses, when they're trying to learn things about the business and we're talking to them about everything that we have going on, all the exciting things, and they don't understand, it can often seem to us that they're either nonchalant or they're not trying to be supportive, when that's not really the case at all. Really, truthfully, a lot of times, like they really do want to be supportive. They really do want to learn about your business. They do want to learn about your passion, but they're not exactly sure how, and they're not exactly sure like where to start in terms of educating themselves with everything. So that's why those conversations, those dream sessions, my husband and I call them dream sessions.
I love that.
Those transparent talks are just so important, to just talk about the business over and over and over again. Just really bring them in to your world, so that they can, like, kind of in a way develop some sort of ownership in your business. Even if they're not a legal part of the business, they still know the ins and outs of your business. They know the heart behind your business. If you ask them a question and they may be the right solution to whatever problem that you have, they'll be able to give a fully informed answer, not only because they know you and they love you, but also because they understand the heart and the mindset behind everything it is that you do. So yeah, have those conversations, and often. That's just so important.
Yeah. Another thing that we did was we actually had the opportunity to have him come to a coaching session with me. So I had hired a business coach, and they had offered, for it to be something that Matt could also attend a part of it. And that was so helpful. So just something that I always like to throw out to others when I'm talking about like ways that you can bring your spouse into your business. Matt and I were not full-time at this point. Like we literally like laughed at the idea of him going full-time in my business. Like we were like, no, we could never work together. We couldn't ever financially afford it. Like we literally were like sarcastic about it. So we didn't go to this session with that as the outcome or what we hoped. And we didn't leave that session knowing like, oh yay, now we're going to be a full-time husband and wife team. We left that session though, feeling like, oh, we could actually talk more about business together. It was almost like he needed to hear from another person in the industry, like, oh, the things that my wife questions or the things that my wife talks about, like they're legit. Like she's not crazy. Like other people have this conversation too. So I think if you ever have an opportunity to bring him into that, whether it's a formal coaching session like ours was, or even just going to dinner, right, with maybe another, if you have a really good friend in the industry and her husband, like the four of you guys just like go out to dinner, go to the movies. Like the plan doesn't have to be to talk about business, but it's probably naturally going to come up because you both are in the industry. And then it just allows for some of that conversation to take place really naturally and for him to see that too, which I think can be really helpful. Another thing was he came to a couple of weddings in my very first year of business. Who I considered like my assistant because it was my first year. I couldn't afford to hire an assistant or bring somebody on. I didn't have like a lot of connections in the industry to like wedding swap and like help other friends out and things like that. And so he was that person. And weddings are not his thing, even though he's full-time in the business now. It's not with the wedding side of it. He would much rather stay at home and watch football. Let's be honest. But for him, being at the wedding was helpful to see like, okay, this is what she does. Yeah. This is why she has a wedding hangover on Sundays after the wedding, because she's exhausted, because look at what's just happened. So if there's a way, for those of you who are wedding professionals, think about maybe there's a wedding you can bring your spouse to. For those of you who are not in the wedding industry, maybe you I saw Rachel in here like with product shop or something like that. Maybe have a fun, like bring your spouse to work day. Like I know that might sound kind of corny and cheesy, but it could end up being like the coolest day ever where like your spouse, maybe it's a day that like his job has off anyway, like it's a federal holiday or something like that. So he doesn't have to take time off, or maybe you guys just plan for it to be like a Saturday afternoon so that he doesn't have to take time off. But bring him in and show him, just let him see some of the ins and outs and behind the scenes of what you're doing on the regular so that he has a better understanding understanding. And then you guys can therefore have some really awesome conversations on the back end about your business, and he can feel even more involved in your business.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think too, something that's so important is that, I think this is the first thing I want to say is that, it's important while you're bringing your spouse into your business, it's important to take some time to not only listen to what they're saying, but also be able to, sorry, I'm reading comments on the side too, so that's
no, you're fine.
So to recognize what their strengths are, recognize what their gifts are. So that's a really great place to meet them where they are, and saying and trying to figure out where they'll fit into your business. So like my husband, Josh, is software engineer, computer engineer, total computer nerd, and I love him times 1,000 for that. So when I first started my business, I needed a logo, I needed a website. There he was. So he created the website, he created the logo, and he even created the he's really great with marketing and advertising and understanding how to somehow convey a message through truncated words and things like that, which is kind of how his coding mindset kind of goes and plays in hand. So he created the name of my business, Hearts Content Events. Because one of the things I was telling him when I first started my business is that I just really want to take the contents of someone's heart and just show them through some tangible ways, through their wedding design, how to highlight the things that truly matter most in their lives. And so he said, well, let's take the contents of your heart and make it Hearts Content Events. And to him, it was just like, let's just do it. It was just plain and simple. And it's like, wow, I would never have thought of that ever. And so, yeah, definitely use your spouse's strengths through while you're bringing them into your business. That's a really great place to start and lay the foundation, and help them take some ownership into what you do.
Absolutely. No, I love that. We have a question here that I think is so good. I was reading it before. So I'd love for us to kind of touch on that. It's from Christina. She says, my husband fully supports our business, but as a wedding planner, with weddings occurring on the weekends and all the prep work that takes place before, it's tough for him to see me booking weddings. So he's really happy about it because he knows it's just more time he doesn't get to spend with me. We both work full-time jobs still, so we try to be protective of our weekend time right now. Any best tips that have worked well for you as you try to balance your time for marriage and business? Such a good question. Do you want to tack it first, start answering, and then I'll jump in here and
Yeah. So one of the things that Josh and I do, and it's a little plug for resources here. I'm a huge iCalendar fan. And one of the things that we do, and I also use a lot of Google Documents. That's a big way that we do our dream sessions, is that even if we're not together, then I can write out some dreams or something like that, and he can respond with that. And so I'm often the person who creates the calendars, creates the systems, and makes sure all of the events in our family life really flows well throughout every single month. So every month I kind of create this calendar and say, these are the dates that, and it's color coded. Yes, Kat, I love color coded things. And so I create this calendar, and it has all the dates for our family things, all the dates for our kids things, all the dates for Josh and when he comes home and what he needs to do for his work, and it's color coded with my business things as well. And from there, we try to be very, very intentional in setting aside at least one day that is just for us. just one day. And it doesn't necessarily have to be some extravagant thing where we go out to dinner and have like a full-blown date night. No, it could be as easy as shipping the kids off to grandma's and sitting at home with Netflix and Chinese food and just watching a comedy show. That's our thing, me and Josh. And it's just so very important to, while you are thinking of all the things that, all the weddings and all of the events and all the things that your husband has on his plate and everything involved, that you still lay that foundation and create that very intentional time, and in a way that also says to your spouse, hey, despite everything else that I have going on in my life, you still are the most important thing, and I want to make very intentional time for you. So yeah, that's the way I would tackle it for sure.
I agree. It's definitely comes down, like boils down to having that conversation. And for Matt and I, quality time is not either one of our love language. So for us, it is a little bit different when we tackle like time that we need to spend together. We're actually both pretty independent people, which it sounds like that would make for like a great thing when like the wife is starting a business. And while it was also really interesting. I feel like we got to a point, because I worked full time for 17 months while I was growing the business. We got to a point, and this is sad to say, but it was almost more like roommates versus like husband and wife, just because we were so independent. We could each have our own schedules, and we would share it. Like we would know when the person was coming and going, but we didn't necessarily have like true quality time together.
Yes.
And so that was something that we had to have a reality check, and we had to switch that around for ourselves and for our life, for our marriage, for the business, for everything. So I think it really boils down to like having that conversation with your spouse and saying like, okay, like what can I do better? What can we do better as a couple? And what are we willing to sacrifice as a couple? Because like you said, like when you were talking about like going through your question, Christina, like you're both working full time. So for you guys, you may say, you know what, like quality time is so important to the two of you and to your marriage. And you are working full time right now. So your time is limited already just with business and full-time job and now marriage. Like that's a lot of different roles that you're playing and you're trying to play well. So sitting down with your spouse and saying, well, what are we willing to sacrifice? And how long are we willing to sacrifice this for? Matt and I set an end date to where like, I'm going to be full-time by X day. So we knew, even though quality time wasn't our love language, we knew like the hustle day. Does that make sense? Like, okay, well, it's going to be real crazy town for this next like 6 months. While, you know, weddings on the weekends and working 9 to 5 and building my business when I'm home. That means I'm on my laptop on the couch, like while he is sitting there beside me, but we're not really together because I'm working and he's here. Like it was just a very, very, very crazy schedule, but we knew how long we could go about that schedule. And if we passed that length of time, we would have had to have another conversation and decide, is it worth it to keep going? So I would like practically sit down with him, and just for any of you guys out there, and talk with your spouse about that and determine like, okay, is this working? And or if it's not ideal for us, how long can we sacrifice for it right now to get to the ideal point? And you might be surprised at their answer, you know, or it might be something that you find is like kind of a struggle for you guys, and you need to like revisit and figure out what that sacrifice point looks like for y'all. Christina, and I love putting everything on the calendar, and he loves spontaneous time. But hey, you know what? That's okay. That's like marriage, right? That's like two opposites attract. Like what in the world? Matt and I are the same way with that. He's like, oh, we'll figure it out. And I'm like, Saturdays in like 2 days.
Oh my gosh.
We need to
Josh says the same thing. We'll figure it out. No, we will not.
Oh my gosh. You said we've decided to dedicate Saturdays for me, not to do business work and do business stuff on Sundays, but this is helpful. Yeah. And then on the weekends that you have a wedding and Saturdays are supposed to be your day, maybe you guys have a weeknight, like Adrienne was saying, and you have some sort of weeknight where no, it's not a full day, but at least you know, like, hey, Tuesday night, you're not going to answer emails. You're not going to work on anything for your business, and you're going to spend it with your spouse doing whatever spontaneous thing that he wants to do or you guys want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Like in the whole theme of just being completely transparent, like Josh and I just went through a season last year where he came to me and he said, you know what, all these late nights, all this running here and there, doing 25 plus weddings per year, it's not working for me. It's not going to work. And I applaud him for having the gumption to stand up to me and say that, you know, because I'm one of those people who is go, 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 do this, do that, do this, do that, tackle everything off the to-do list, and just act with it and think about the consequences later.
Right.
That's definitely the type of person that I am. And the fact that he was able to come to me and establish that vulnerability and say, you know what, this isn't working, was really awesome. And so what we did is that we sat down, we had some really raw and vulnerable and honest conversations about the business and about our marriage and where we want it to go. And we kind of resolved that, you know what, I can't take on 20 plus weddings every year. I can't take on, and this is one thing that Kat and I even talked about a few months ago, that like I can't take on day of clients anymore, because that usually racks up so much time in my schedule. Instead, we're just doing full service planning and design now, and that allows me to take on less amounts of weddings, but for
Mm-hmm.
the same amount of profit, but allows me to have a little bit more margin in my life, allows me to spend a little bit more intentional time with my husband as well as my kids. And so it's really about deciding what exactly what Kat said, like, what are you willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to change? What are you willing to do together in order to make this balance work for you? That's really the
Absolutely.
biggest thing.
Absolutely. What do you guys have any other like specific questions for us? Christina, I loved yours. I love, talking about balance with working a full-time job and running a business and wanting to spend time with your spouse is so hard. So thank you for bringing that up. But if there are any other questions, we would definitely love to make sure that we answer them kind of as we wrap up here within the next like 10-ish minutes, or really however long it takes,
Yeah.
to make sure we answer all of y'all's questions.
I know that
Um,
I got a question on
oh,
it's called
perfect.
Instagram stories this morning.
Awesome.
So Jessica wants to know what our thoughts are in just trying to explain to your spouse when we have to work late nights and work often, even though we control our own schedules. So yeah, that's one of the things that she wanted to know about for sure.
That's a good one. I feel like it kind of goes back to a lot of what we've said in terms of just having like communicating with
Yeah.
them, right? Everything boils down to communication.
Yes.
But just trying to explain like whether, why is this really just a season of it's going to be for about a month, or is this now something that, we say it's not going to be for very long, but then 6 months later, we're still doing late nights.
Yeah.
Like we're still working all the time. I know even now with working full time, with Matt and I both working full time in the business, there have been times where I'll still have my laptop, like I'll whip my laptop back out after dinner, and start working on stuff. And he'll be like, do you really need to work on that now? Like we can work on that tomorrow. And he's like a good checks and balances for me. He's really good at closing his brain off and being like, work's over, like it's done. Whereas I'm like, no, there's still emails in the inbox. There's still things I could be doing. And it's harder for me to shut my brain off. But what I would say, I think Jessica was who you said asked that question. What my suggestion would be, obviously, it's all about communication. So really like trying to explain like, okay, this is a season for whatever reason.
Yeah.
It might be. But then also understanding like it is a checks and balances. So is it where you need to have one night a week where you don't work late? because you need to spend time with your spouse.
Yeah.
Or even during a busy wedding season, right? Like for if you're a wedding planner, I don't know if she is or not, but for us, I know the fall is really busy for my team. September and October are crazy town. But just because it's a crazy 60-day period, I still need to have time for my spouse. So whether that's having that one night a week, or, you know, one Saturday that I already know I don't have a wedding, and I block it off and I say, I'm not going to take a wedding, and this is going to be our weekend to do something.
Yeah.
So really trying to like explain that. And also just reminding your spouse, because this is something I feel like Matt would forget, and even we forget. As a business owner, you are playing so many different roles just within your business. So that also sometimes you feel like you're drowning because you have to do the CEO thing, the human resources thing, the financial advisor thing. Like you have to do all of the different things. And so maybe just explaining to your spouse, like, well, honey, like right now, this is what's going on, and this is why I'm feeling overwhelmed, because he probably doesn't really understand like the ins and outs like you do. So again, like communicating all of that, I think could be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you are able to communicate with your spouse how overwhelmed you are and everything that you have on your plate, then that gives them the opportunity to stand up and say, okay, well, you have all these things on your plate. How can I help you? That kind of brings them into your business even more. So it's like a two-way street, you know. It kind of really helps to kill two birds with one stone, for sure.
Absolutely. Megan, I see your question. I love it. How do you balance the tough times challenges you have? My husband is a fixer, so it can be hard. Since I share frustration, he wants to fix it, if that makes sense. Yes, totally. 100%. I think there will be times when Matt and I have conversations where I'll literally say, like, I don't need you to do anything but listen. Like legitimately, like that's all. Whether it's about business or it's about life or whatever. I am a verbal processor. I need to talk about things, and he will, it's just funny. He doesn't need to talk about things. And so there are definitely times where I'll kind of preface the conversation with like, listen, you can't fix it. You can't really do anything but listen to me vent about it, or, you know, talk about it. And I know that's weird to you and you don't like to do that, but I just really need a listening ear right now. So I would suggest kind of going about it from that perspective too, of like having that disclaimer in the beginning of, hey, like this is what's about to go down and we're not going to try to fix it. We're just going to listen, and that's okay. I also have found, that for some things that maybe come up in business that I'm like, you know what, he's really not going to understand, or he's not going to have as much like camaraderie with it, like as I would. I have other people I can go to and I can talk to. And it doesn't mean I'm hiding it from him. Of course, I'm happy to share it with him and like talk with him about it. But if I just really need that like extra tender love and care of someone who like really like wants to like have that same like, yes, girl, absolutely, I totally get it. My really good friend Emily, yeah, I talk to her. I'll even call my mom up sometimes just to be like, Mama, I know you don't really get it, but I know that you can pretend like you do, and I can just tell her. So I think it's helpful to have those, like as women, I think it's helpful that we have other women in our lives that are very similar in that sense to us, whether they're talkers or not talkers, depending on how you are, so that you can have just that like, yes, girl, I understand, and that like community aspect. While it is so helpful to have our spouse, it's also really helpful to have those best girlfriends too. So I'm a firm believer in like having both in your life, so that you can have both of those viewpoints and both of those people to encourage you.
Yeah, I honestly would have said the exact same thing, especially in the realm of setting that disclaimer, setting those expectations from the very beginning when you have that conversation, being like, okay, I don't need you to fix this. I don't need you to be Superman for me. I just need to talk about this. Kat and I are very similar in the aspect where I think your love language is words of affirmation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm huge on that. So I don't necessarily need Josh to act on things or to fix things. I just need him to hear me, and I need him to be like, girl, really? Yeah. Just and really respond in a way that that helps me process the information and understand that everything is okay. For me, like that affirmation alone is the solution for a lot of things. Because oftentimes, like as we're talking it out, we are figuring out our own issue or figuring out the solution. The solution, the word, I can't even talk, the solution to the problem to begin with. So that is definitely helpful, setting that expectation from the very, very, very beginning.
Absolutely. I saw the next question and I was trying to remember the name of it. Brooke, you asked, are there any conferences or workshops for couples in creative business? Ooh. I do know of one. And I will think of the name of it in just a minute. I'm so sorry. I was trying to Google really quickly. It takes place in Georgia. I know like where it takes place. It takes place in Meg in Georgia. That's so weird that I know the things, but for some reason I cannot remember the name of the conference.
Was it Connect?
So maybe it is Connect. Is it Connect? Maybe it is Connect. I'm Googling it.
Is it Jody? And
yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure that that's it.
I just found it. It is. Good teamwork. Awesome. So that's the only one that I know of right now. I'm going to pop it here in the link for you guys. That is a conference for couples in business. I believe they started focusing mainly with photographers because there are a lot of photographers in the industry that were either husband-wife teams or thinking about it, but now it's branched out. You don't learn photography specific things. It really is about like marriage and heart behind it. You do like team building exercises, and you also have a lot of free time. I've heard it's really awesome, but Matt and I have not been, so I can't tell you from like personal experience. Let's see. Any other questions, you guys, before we kind of start to wrap up? Adrienne, I would love for you to tell them like where they can find you if they have other like marriage questions. I know you and Josh are working on quite a few fun things behind the scenes for couples that will be coming out at some point, and some fun resources and things like that. So I'd love for them to be able to connect with you like on Instagram, your email address, even your website, things like that.
Yeah. So you can find me, my website is www.heartscontentevents.com. And I'll be posting all this stuff in the comments too. So don't worry about having to write that down. But on Instagram, you can find me at Hearts Content Events. My email address is adrienne@heartscontentevents.com. So easy peasy that way. And yeah, if you have any questions about anything at all, and just like even just need a voice to listen or need a source of encouragement, Josh and I are here for you. Like we've been through it. We're still going through it. The struggle is so real, but we don't have to do this alone. That's really the biggest thing that we want to stress to you guys, that you guys together can not only work through this together, but you can work with like-minded individuals who understand the process that you're going through and want to encourage you along the way.